Good evening, and welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host. In a significant development for human rights advocacy and civil society support, the European Union has announced a major new funding initiative for Kenya. The 500 million shilling program, announced on Friday, February 27, 2026, aims to address what the EU describes as urgent human rights challenges within the country. This deep dive report will examine the details of this substantial investment, explore the context of EU-Kenya relations, and debate the potential impact and implications of this half-billion shilling commitment. We'll be joined by perspectives from government, civil society, and international analysts over the next 12 minutes. First, let's break down the announcement itself. The European Union office in Brussels made the formal declaration, setting aside 500 million shillings specifically to support Kenyan civil society organizations. The key criterion, according to the Funding Opportunity Notice, is an organization's proven capacity to advance and protect human rights. This isn't a general development fund, it's a targeted, thematic investment. The timing is notable, coming just over a year into the second term of President William Ruto's administration, and during the presidency of Donald Trump in the United States, which has seen shifts in global human rights advocacy priorities. The EU is stepping into a space where other traditional donors have sometimes wavered. To understand the scale, we need to put 500 million shillings into context. This is a substantial sum for civil society support. For comparison, in recent years, individual EU grants to Kenyan NGOs have typically ranged between 50 million and 200 million shillings for multi-year projects. A half-billion shilling pool dedicated solely to human rights work represents a significant escalation in direct funding. It suggests the EU perceives either a growing need or a critical opportunity in Kenya's human rights landscape. The funds are not for government programs, but are channeled directly to non-state actors, which is a deliberate strategic choice emphasizing the role of independent watchdogs and advocates. Now, let's examine the potential areas of focus. While the official announcement is broad, historical EU funding in Kenya provides clues. Past initiatives have supported access to justice, protection for human rights defenders, gender equality, and the rights of marginalized communities. Given current national conversations, this new fund could bolster organizations monitoring police conduct, advocating for judicial independence, documenting hate speech, or protecting civic space ahead of future electoral cycles. The requirement for demonstrated capacity means established organizations with a track record will likely be primary beneficiaries, though there may be components for nurturing newer groups. We turn now to our first guest perspective. Joining us is Michael Otieno, a program director at a Nairobi-based governance think tank. Michael, a 500 million shilling EU fund for human rights, what's your initial reaction to this announcement? Michael Otieno, good evening. My reaction is cautiously optimistic. The amount is impressive and sends a strong signal of international confidence in Kenya's civil society sector. However, the devil is in the details, the implementation modalities. Will this funding reach grassroots organizations outside Nairobi and major towns? Will it support the operational costs that keep these NGOs alive, or will it be restricted to specific, short-term projects? The history of such large funds is that they often get absorbed by a handful of large, Nairobi-based NGOs with sophisticated proposal writing teams. The real test will be whether it empowers the human rights defender in Kakamega or the community paralegal in Kitui. Host, a critical point about geographic and organizational inclusivity. Let's bring in another voice. With us is Dr. Aisha Mohammed, a senior lecturer in international relations at the University of Nairobi. Dr. Aisha, beyond the direct impact, what does this announcement say about the state of EU-Kenya relations in 2026? Dr. Aisha Mohamed, thank you. This initiative reaffirms the EU as a consistent, values-based partner for Kenya, especially in the governance sphere. It comes at a time when Kenya is navigating complex geopolitical currents. The United States, under President Trump, has taken a more transactional approach to foreign policy, often downplaying human rights in favor of security and trade deals. China's engagement, while massive in infrastructure, rarely comes with explicit human rights conditionalities. The EU is therefore carving out a distinct niche. It is saying the quality of governance and the protection of fundamental freedoms remain non-negotiable pillars of its partnership with Kenya. This 500 million shillings is both an investment and a statement of principle. Host, a statement of principle indeed, but such statements can provoke reactions. we must consider the potential pushback. Could this level of direct funding to civil society be viewed by some in government as external interference in domestic affairs? There is a growing global narrative, present in Kenya as well, that portrays foreign-funded NGOs as agents of foreign agendas. How might the Ruto administration perceive this? Supporters might see it as bolstering crucial accountability mechanisms that complement government efforts. Critics could frame it as the EU bypassing the state to empower its critics. This tension is an inherent part of the democracy and governance support ecosystem. Let's look at some comparative figures to understand the financial landscape. In the last fiscal year, total estimated foreign aid to Kenya from all bilateral and multilateral donors was approximately 300 billion shillings. Within that, governance and human rights sectors typically receive a smaller slice compared to health, infrastructure, and education. This new EU fund of 500 million shillings, while large for its specific niche, represents about 0.17% of total annual aid flows. However, its symbolic weight is far greater than its percentage. It's a concentrated injection into a politically sensitive sector. To visualize the scale of this commitment against other recent notable figures, consider this. The fund is equivalent to the construction cost of approximately 8 well-equipped county-level hospitals. It is more than double the 206 million shillings allocated for a recent national civic education drive. Yet, it is just a fraction of the 11 billion shillings involved in a major port infrastructure loan. This places it in the category of a strategically significant, high-impact pot of money rather than a transformative macroeconomic investment. We now open the debate to a wider panel. Joining Michael and Dr. Aisha is Sarah Kemboy, a human rights lawyer with over 15 years of experience. Sarah, from the frontline, what are the most pressing human rights challenges in Kenya today that this fund could address? Sarah Kemboy, thank you for having me. The challenges are multifaceted. First, the shrinking civic space, the use of regulations, taxation, and sometimes intimidation to constrain NGO operations. Second, persistent police brutality and extrajudicial killings, which require robust documentation and legal advocacy. Third, the rights of minorities and vulnerable groups, which are often sidelined. Fourth, the weaponization of hate speech and ethnic polarization, especially online. And fifth, economic and social rights, the right to food, health, and a clean environment, which are increasingly litigated. 500 million shillings, if strategically deployed, could fund crucial litigation, public awareness campaigns, protection programs for defenders, and policy research across these areas. But it must be agile funding. Human rights crises don't follow bureaucratic procurement timelines. Host, agile funding, a key operational point. Michael Otano, you mentioned inclusivity earlier. How can this fund avoid the pitfall of only enriching the NGO industry in Westlands and instead achieve nationwide impact? Michael Otano, the EU delegation must mandate and monitor a sub-granting mechanism. The primary grantees, likely the larger organizations, should be required to partner with and channel a significant portion, say 40%, to community-based organizations in at least 5 different regions. The reporting should track not just money spent, but stories of change from the grassroots. They could also create a separate, simplified funding window specifically for smaller organizations with less burdensome application requirements. The metric of success shouldn't be the number of reports produced in Nairobi, but the number of human rights violations prevented or redressed in the counties. Host, Dr. Aisha, from the international relations angle, could this fund strain the otherwise strong EU-Kenya economic partnership, which includes a significant economic partnership agreement? Dr. AISHAMOHMED, it's a delicate balance, but I believe both sides have matured in managing it. The Kenyan government is aware that EU partnership comes with this governance dimension. Conversely, the EU knows that a confrontational approach is counterproductive. I expect this funding will be framed and implemented as supporting Kenya's own constitutional vision and the government's development agenda, which explicitly includes governance. The dialogue will be key. If the EU engages government counterparts transparently about the fund's objectives, framing civil society as partners in development, not adversaries, it can mitigate friction. The alternative is a silent, tense tolerance, which helps no one. Host, let's delve into some hypothetical allocation scenarios. If we break down the 500 million shillings, a plausible model might see 200 million shillings dedicated to institutional support for human rights organizations, covering salaries, rent, and core operations that other donors rarely fund. Another 150 million shillings could go to specific thematic projects, like monitoring detention facilities or digital rights advocacy. 100 million shillings might be reserved for rapid response grants for urgent situations, such as legal aid for a sudden crackdown on protests. The final 50 million shillings could fund research, documentation, and regional networking. This is just one model, but it illustrates the need for a mixed approach. Sarah Kemboy, a rapid response component is vital. Can you give us an example of a situation where such funding would have made a critical difference in the past? Sarah Kemboi, absolutely. Consider the COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020. Overnight, new regulations were enacted that severely restricted movement. Police enforcement was often violent. We had documented cases of individuals being beaten for being out past curfew or vendors having their goods destroyed. A rapid response fund could have immediately deployed legal teams to police stations, provided emergency medical aid, and filed urgent court petitions to challenge abusive enforcement within days, not weeks. Instead, organizations had to scramble, repurpose other funds, or wait for lengthy grant applications. Agile money saves lives and upholds the law in real time. Host, that's a powerful, concrete example. This brings us to the question of sustainability. What happens when this 500 million shillings, likely to be dispersed over 3 to 4 years, runs out? Does it create a dependency, or does it build lasting capacity? Michael Ota no, the dependency cycle is a real risk. The EU must design this initiative with a clear exit or transition strategy from day one. This means funding should explicitly build sustainable local resource mobilization capacity, training organizations in local fundraising, social enterprise models, and endowment building. It should also strengthen their accountability to Kenyan citizens and members, not just foreign donors. The goal should be to create a civil society sector that is more resilient and less vulnerable to the shifting priorities of international diplomacy. Host, shifting gears slightly, we cannot discuss EU funding without acknowledging the broader context of accountability. The EU itself demands high levels of financial and programmatic reporting from its grantees. This is necessary to prevent misuse, but it also creates a massive administrative burden. Is there a risk that the compliance tail wags the program dog? That more energy goes into auditing and reporting than into actual human rights work? Sarah Kmboi, it's not a risk, it's a daily reality. I've seen organizations hire more finance officers than program officers to manage donor compliance. The EU has an opportunity here to pioneer a trust-based, outcome-focused reporting model for this fund. Instead of requiring receipts for every cup of tea served at a community meeting, they could focus on verifiable outcomes. Was the unjustly detained person released? Was the discriminatory policy amended? Did the community report fewer incidents of violence? This would free up crucial resources and align incentives with actual impact. Host, a compelling argument for reform from within. Dr. Aisha, looking at the global chessboard, could this Kenyan initiative be a pilot for a broader EU strategy in the region, especially with tensions in neighboring countries? Dr. Aisha very likely. Kenya is often seen as a stable anchor in a turbulent region. A successful, impactful human rights fund here can serve as a model for similar, perhaps scaled down, interventions in other East African community partner states. It allows the EU to demonstrate that its values-based approach can yield positive, tangible results without destabilizing partnerships. If this 500 million shilling fund is seen to strengthen, not weaken, Kenya's social fabric and rule of law, it becomes a powerful case study for Brussels to use in internal debates about the future of its development policy. Host, as we begin to wrap up, let's address the elephant in the room: public perception. To the average Kenyan struggling with the cost of living, where a liter of milk costs 70 shillings and a loaf of bread is over 60 shillings, hearing about 500 million shillings for human rights NGOs might elicit cynicism. How do advocates bridge that perception gap and demonstrate that strong human rights institutions benefit everyone's daily life? Sarah Kmboi, we must tell better stories. It's not about abstract treaties. It's about the fact that when you can hold your local chief or police officer accountable for corruption or brutality, your life is better. It's about knowing you have a fair chance in court if your land is grabbed. It's about women having equal inheritance rights. It's about clean air and water being legally enforceable rights. This fund, if it supports litigation that stops a factory from polluting a river or advocacy that secures better pay for tea pickers, has a direct, material impact on livelihoods. We need to communicate that link relentlessly. Host, communication is key. Finally, to each of our panelists, one last thought. In one sentence, what is the single most important thing the administrators of this EU fund must get right to ensure its success and legacy? Michael OTA no, they must prioritize funding local, grassroots agency and leadership over imposing predefined, Brussels-designed solutions. Dr. AISHA MOHAMED, they must maintain transparent and respectful dialogue with the Kenyan government to ensure the initiative is seen as a partnership, not a provocation. Sarah KMBOI, they must trust Kenyan civil society with flexible, core funding that allows them to respond to real crises, not just color inside the lines of a log frame. Host, thank you to Michael OTA No, Dr. Aisha Mohammed, and Sarah Kemboy for that insightful and robust discussion. In conclusion, the European Union's 500 million shilling human rights initiative for Kenya is a major financial and political commitment with the potential to significantly bolster the country's civil society landscape. Its announcement in February 2026 places it at an interesting juncture in both Kenyan and global politics. The debates around its implementation, who gets the money, how it's monitored, and how it engages with the state will determine whether it becomes a model of effective international support or another case study in the complexities of donor aid. Its ultimate success won't be measured in euros spent or reports filed, but in whether the most vulnerable Kenyans feel safer, more empowered, and more able to claim their constitutional rights. The journey of this $500 million is just beginning, and its path will be one to watch closely. For continued coverage on this and all stories shaping our nation, subscribe to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host. Thank you for watching and good night.